Well, good evening and welcome to Hurricane Hub Live. It's Saturday evening and got a lot to talk about here on Hurricane Hub Live. Of course, we've got Hurricane Humberto, we've got Tropical Depression number 9. Thanks for joining us. I'm meteorologist Evan Stewart here at 13 News Now, broadcasting out of Norfolk, Virginia. And we know we have some folks who are probably watching from other parts of the country, and this is where we're going to talk about the two big tropical systems that are out there. One, a monster of a storm. That is Hurricane Humberto and what will likely be Imelda coming up. So here are the headlines. Hurricane Humberto has strengthened into a Category 5 hurricane. Tropical depression formed earlier today, likely to become Imelda, and a really complicated forecast, although I think things are starting to come in line now. It's a little bit better compared to what we were seeing even last night, as there's some indications that maybe strengthening Hurricane Humberto will help pull Imelda away from the U.S. coastline. So let's get right to it. Hurricane Humberto is out here north and east of Puerto Rico, south and east of the island of Bermuda, a monster of a hurricane. Tropical Depression number 9. We just got the 8 o'clock advisory in from the Hurricane Center. No change from the 5 o'clock advisory. Still not well organized yet, but it is expected to become a tropical storm late tonight or into the day tomorrow. But as we take a look at Humberto, just a classic looking hurricane. Look how symmetrical it is. You know, that eye is almost in the dead center. There was a little bit of a eye wall replacement cycle when we get these major hurricanes, especially Category 4 and 5 strength. That inner eye wall will sometimes collapse as another one forms around it, what we call, again, an eye wall replacement cycle. And we had one a little bit earlier today, saw a little bit of the eye getting a little cloudy in some spots, but now we've seen it really reform and it is strengthened. You know, it has gone up to a Category 5 storm now with 160-mile-per-hour winds. And here's just a different look on the satellite where we enhance those cloud tops when we have just the regular infrared. It's kind of hard to see some of the details. This measures the cloud tops and the cold surfaces. And again, you can see just how symmetrical it is. Maybe it displaced a little bit off center here, but again, a very well organized hurricane. Winds of 160 miles per hour as of the 5 o'clock advisory. We get advisories every 6 hours. However, once a storm gets closer to land, we'll get advisories every 3 hours. So that's why we'll have an 8 o'clock advisory on Tropical Depression number 9, but we don't have one here on Humberto. It's moving to the west-northwest at 10. Again, 160-mile-per-hour winds gusting up to 195, and it might even strengthen a little bit more. The 12-hour forecast calls for winds of 165. And then this forecast track is very similar to what we saw with Erin. Erin was a little farther south and west, but it's going to split the difference here between Cape Hatteras and the island of Bermuda, weakening a little bit as it moves off towards the north and east. But that doesn't mean that there won't be impacts. There'll be primarily coastal impacts here up and down the eastern seaboard with rip currents, large waves, the swells from this massive Category 5 hurricane. Even though it'll be a 4 and a 3 as it makes a run towards the east coast, those waves will still be with it, propagating outward. And that could lead to beach erosion, talked about rip currents, and even some overwash and some coastal flooding and higher than normal tides. And we've seen overwash several times along Highway 12. Those of you who are watching from outside of the region, probably familiar with the Outer Banks, Rodanthe, because of the movie talking about Nights at Rodanthe, and how those homes that were built, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, there was so much beach ahead of them, and now that beach has been washed away, and several homes have been washed away as well. And just a few weeks ago, down towards Buxton, which is near Cape Hatteras, we had a home from a non-tropical system go into the water, and there's still several that are in perilous positions there. And Highway 12 is the main highway along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, taking you from the Virginia, just a little bit south of the Virginia border, all the way down the Outer Banks. And in some spots, it's just a very narrow strip of land and just a berm of sand that's really protecting Highway 12. And we see that overwash, and we see that quite a bit, and it ends up having to close down Highway 12. And then you also have the ferries that run between Hatteras Island and Ocracoke Island and the mainland. So that's also a concern as well. So even though it's going to be well offshore, it will have some coastal impacts. As I said, expected to remain offshore and curve out to sea, but the swells from Humberto will impact the coast next week. Rough surf, beach erosion, possibly high tides. So that's Humberto, and strengthening Humberto is actually going to help steer Imelda. And how does that happen? Well, Humberto is just so big, it's going to break down this ridge that was looking like it was going to block Imelda, what is likely to be Imelda soon, from moving off towards the east or out to sea, and was likely going to come ashore. Well, now it's actually going to break down that ridge a little bit, Humberto is, and that might be the exit strategy here for Tropical Depression number 9. Again, as of the 8 o'clock advisory, just in 35-mile-per-hour winds moving to the northwest at 5. And it's going to slowly move northwest here through the Bahamas, likely becoming a tropical storm later tonight or tomorrow, and then possibly even strengthening into a hurricane on Tuesday, and then come to a stop off the southeast coast. If you've been watching the past few nights, the models were starting to hint, that it was going to come ashore towards South Carolina. And last night, we started to see a few of these models say, wait a minute. The European model for several days was kind of going back and forth. One run would say it would come ashore, and another run would have it do a loop, stall and do a loop, and then come ashore. And then we started to see a few that were saying, maybe it's actually going to go east. And that's because the models didn't have a good handle on what was going to happen with Humberto. Because at the time, Humberto wasn't supposed to be a Category 5 hurricane. So since Humberto has really overperformed, that's changed all the dynamics of the atmosphere here in the Western Atlantic. And that's being fed now into the computer models. We have also got the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that have been flying into these storms the past couple of days. So that's additional data going into the computer models and really changed what the forecasts were with this storm. So again, this is the official National Hurricane Center forecast calling for the storm to stall here off of South Carolina and then take a right hook. Now, it's going to be a slow mover making that right turn. And while it's good news that we don't have a landfalling hurricane, at one point it looked like it might come ashore, move into the upstates of South Carolina, the mountains of North Carolina, which yesterday was technically the anniversary. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, Hurricane Hub Live, of Hurricane Helene making landfall in Florida. That was yesterday, but today is the day that most folks in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and southwestern Virginia talk about their landfall because of the flooding that came from Helene. So there was some concern that if it moved inland, it would stall and produce copious amounts of rain. So that is some good news. But still some concerns along the coast, because if it stalls or is slowly moving off towards the east, that means through North Carolina, South Carolina, we'll see those winds continuing to come in here out of the east. So you're going to be buffeted by those winds. Even if it's just sitting off the coast, that'll still produce those waves. And in the meantime, you still have the swells from Humberto. So a lot could still happen along the coastlines of North Carolina and South Carolina. Now, the heaviest of the rain will likely be more concentrated closer to the coastline, probably south and east of Interstate 95. So we're not seeing the heavy rainfall moving inland, but still we're going to see some impacts here from Tropical Depression number 9, which by Tuesday will likely be Helene, will likely be Imelda. So here's the official forecast from all the different computer models that are specific to hurricane forecasting. And you'll notice, taking us here into Tuesday evening, some curve it a little bit earlier, but a good number bring it here off the coast of South Carolina and then jut it towards the east. Now, there's one here that carries it back towards the United States, and then another one, that's the Euro, that actually curves it back as well. So the vast majority of the models have it moving towards the east. Could it still curve inland? That's certainly possible. Could it stall and then maybe come back towards the coast? That's certainly possible as well. So we can't write this off, even though the official forecast calls for that turn to the east, even though a majority of the models call for that turn to the east, you still can't let your guard down, because this is a change from what we had last night, and this could change into the day tomorrow. So this is why we invite you to check in with Hurricane Hub Live. We do it every night at 8 o'clock to give you the latest information. So Hunter Force will be in tomorrow night, so there might be a little bit of a change. So that was all the computer models specifically that are designed for hurricane forecasting. But our two main global forecast models, Global Forecast System, the GFS, that's what we sometimes call the American model, and the Euro, the ECMWF, they also do a very good job at forecasting tropical systems. The Euro, for the past several years, has really outperformed the American model. But we still run both of them, And then we do what we call ensemble forecasting. So what we do is we run that model, then we tweak the initial conditions. Even though we have Hurricane Hunter aircraft that have been in there, maybe they didn't find the strongest wind or the lowest pressure. So we'll tweak the initial conditions just a little bit and run the model again. We'll run it 20, 30 times. And that gives us a little bit of a different forecast. And again, the American model, you can see there's still a lot of uncertainty. A good number do take it off towards the east, but there's still some that bring it onshore or stall it and maybe drift it off towards the north. So that's why we can't totally write things off just yet. And this sort of greenish line in here that sort of comes around and then moves around, that's the average of all these models. And again, once you get out farther, you have models that are going all the way almost to Europe and some that are back here across Texas. So that's why that green line or that average sort of moves around like that. But again, a lot of the models do carry it offshore. That's the American model. What about the European model? Same sort of thing. Some stall it and maybe drift it off towards the west. A good number here take it off towards the east. So while we're starting to become a little more increasingly confident that it is going to make that turn to the east, until it does so, until it stalls, I like to say that I want to see it to believe it. Now, we do have already tropical storm warnings up for the east coast of Florida, because even though it's not going to make landfall, it's going to be close enough to bring tropical storm conditions to the east coast of Florida. Have tropical storm warnings, of course, for the Bahamas right now, and it's still likely to become a tropical storm late tonight or tomorrow. What about the rainfall? Really concentrated along the coastline. I mentioned sort of along Interstate 95, which comes right through here. South and east of there is probably where we'll see some of the heaviest of the rain. Now, this has really changed from yesterday as well. Midday yesterday, the 4 to 7 yellow was all the way up here in south central Virginia. And then by this time yesterday, it has shifted southward, and even southeastern Virginia was in the 2 to 4, and we still had 4 to 7 here south of Raleigh and down through the coastal areas of North Carolina and South Carolina. Now with the storm stalling and moving off towards the east, it's really concentrating the heaviest of the rain right along the coastline. This is based on the current forecasting and the current thinking, and if the forecast changes, and if maybe it's a little bit slower to make that turn, could certainly see more rain, and then could possibly, make a turn towards the west, as some of the models say. Right now, again, official forecast calls for it to make that right hook. Got to wait, see it happen before we totally believe that that is the actual scenario. But we are getting a little more confident that that is going to happen. Not nearly as confident as we are. We know what Humberto is going to do. That hasn't really changed, but definitely still got to wait and see what's going to happen here with Imelda. So the trends are showing Imelda stalling off the South Carolina coastline. The rainfall amounts will really depend on how far north or west Imelda goes. And those onshore winds could still contribute to Humberto's swells and could still cause some significant issues down along the coastline. So those are our two main systems that we're watching. Of course, the only two that are out there, Humberto, that major Category 5 hurricane again, and then Tropical Depression number 9, which could become Imelda a little bit later tonight or into the day tomorrow. So coming up here after this quick little break, we'll take a look back at Hurricane Helene. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. A year ago yesterday, Hurricane Helene made landfall in the Big Bend region of Florida near the city of Perry. But as we mentioned earlier, today is considered landfall by many in western North Carolina and southwestern Virginia. Today is the day the rains fell and those rivers rose. About 30 minutes from Asheville, people who live in the small town of Marshall are still recovering post-Helene. Chad Silver has a look at how far they've come 1 year after the storm.
11 months ago, National Guard military vehicles were the norm around the small town of Marshall. Today, they've been replaced by skateboards and other small symbols that this town is bouncing back.
It's nice to see customers back on the street, you know, to see our local folk coming back to town, you know. So, yeah. It's good to see happy faces again.
Chris Worley manages Shady Side Florist, the town's only floral shop. We met him a month after Hurricane Helene hit as he sifted through what was left of his livelihood.
All of our materials, all of our stations, all of our equipment, you know, 50 years of business was gone overnight.
Now he says business is close to where it was before the storm. One of the last pieces will happen this week when contractors finish repairing the front of his shop. He says he wouldn't be where he is today without the volunteers.
We've had volunteers come from probably just about every state on this side of the Mississippi and some on the other side. You know, come in and work in the mud and help.
It was absolutely devastating. It's a bucket list that I never want to check again.
The last 11 months have been just as overwhelming for Holly West.
The dump trucks, the people that came to help, the skid steers, the big equipment. It was worth crying over because so many people just came to help and continue to do, which is absolutely amazing.
After Helene ripped apart her brick and mortar restaurant in downtown Marshall, she decided to reopen as a food truck.
It was something that I wanted to do more of this year anyhow. Not that I don't love downtown, but I wasn't a restaurant anymore, so I wasn't a gathering place like I used to be.
Many of the buildings along the French Broad River took the brunt of the storm here, but everywhere you look, life is returning, and it's permanently changed the people who live here.
We all kind of knew each other. Hey, how you doing? Speak, you know, whatever. But when you're wading through 2 foot of mud through your busted out buildings and everybody's in the same shape, in the same boat, it's a real gatherer of people.
Now, North Carolina wasn't the only state hard hit by Helene. Towns in southwestern Virginia saw devastating flooding, and in Tennessee, the town of Irwin was nearly taken off the map by the storm. Charles Peak with the Weather Channel returned to the town, speaking with first responders who helped evacuate the only hospital in the area after floodwaters breached its doors.
I've been around the Nochakie River all my life, and that day, you be standing next to someone and you had to yell at them because the river was like it was mad. It was roaring like a train.
Water was already coming across that. I got here about 10 o'clock that morning.
And we were just putting patients in ambulances.
I think we had 11 patients that day. We put them in 3 ambulances and was getting ready to leave, and we got stopped because the water had gotten too high to go back out across that road.
And then just all hell broke loose. Water and sand and trees and the patients begging you not to let them die. And we were trying to figure it out, where we're going, what we were going to do. And by the time we could make a decision, the water was, knee deep, thigh deep, waist deep. It just kept coming.
Thank goodness the Irwin Fire Department was here. If they hadn't, we wouldn't have had a plan C. Our plan then was to get them up to the roof using the ladders the best we could. The ones that really we couldn't get up to the top that way, we got a Stokes basket and then had enough people to pull the Stokes basket up to the top and get them up that way.
We waited and waited. They said no help was coming. And there was trees floating by. Were size of semi-trucks. Everything just flying by.
We all held hands at prayer. They was singing, fellowshipping, just how people's emotions come out. And everyone stayed very calm. It was a life and death situation, and everybody handled it very well.
Some people panicked, some people just worked through it, but in the end, everybody came together. We were standing there, and I saw one helicopter. It came down this way, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw 3 other helicopters sitting over here. And I thought, well, we're going to get out of here. We got off there, and that's what matters. I mean, do we still have nightmares? Yep, we do. Or when it have a bad rainstorm, everybody more cautious? Absolutely. So, people's made running jokes. We're gonna put life jackets in the ambulances now, but I mean, it's not far from the truth. I'm truly thankful for the good Lord above that He allowed us to get off there and, fight the good fight another day. And we're still rebuilding, as you can tell. I mean, it's not the same, but it's still home.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for tonight's episode of Hurricane Hub Live. We do this every night at 8 p.m. here broadcasting from 13 News Now in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm meteorologist Evan Stewart. Hunter Force will be in tomorrow night, and Tim Pandages will be in Monday night, and we'll have a lot to talk about as we go through the coming days with Humberto and what will likely be Imelda. Thanks for joining us.